that's a perfect example of something that we've done here down in Little Tassie that has been shared with our colleagues across the world.
And I remember calling up Leo Ruffo, who was my manager at the time, and said, Leo, we've got to look at this a bit harder, because if this works, it's just a game changer for the site.
Sometimes it's the other way. Rio Tinto's a big employer globally, so we've got things to share, but equally we've got things to learn, and sometimes we learn from the smallest member that we've got to bring in.
And that is what we're going to learn about in the final episode of this series of Hotspots. We'll get to know how innovation has become part of the culture of Bell Bay Aluminium, and part of the reason it's still operating 70 years after it began. And it's not just innovation in manufacturing, but in the many different processes that happen to keep this Tasmanian part of the organisation up and running. And it turns out this podcast loosely fits into that category, as I learned standing on the stairs of the admin building on site. Do either of you remember the original Hotspots?
Absolutely. I used to appear in the golf items all the time.
So this is Lee Darcy. Lee is the Principal Advisor, Energy and Strategy, and apparently a keen golfer and our in-house Hotspots historian.
Kevin Whittaker was the man that did Hotspots and had his own camera, and I remember as a kid my brother won an 8-ball table in a fishing competition, and Kevin came to the house and took all these photos, and it appeared in the Hotspots. And my father, who's 86, still looks at old Hotspot stuff from this site.
So what was it?
It was our newsletter, weekly newsletter, but the front page always told you who was in hospital, what ward they were in, and when they were coming out, and told when people were on holidays. And the back page was always about things for sale. And it was, and you reflect now, they still get put up on a Georgetown Facebook page, and it's amazing how cheap things were. But then it always had every single department on site had photographs and things, and it was all about off-site stuff, on-site stuff. So, but it was a full-time role.
So gossip and news?
Oh yes, and always had good jokes in there that people on the site told about each other. Some probably wouldn't talk about today, but they were always good, always things about fishing trips on the weekends and things. So it was a great, but the other thing, it actually brought the community together, because it wasn't just about the smelter. It had Lions Club, Rotary Club, every sports club in the town had an article in there, whether they worked here or not. So it was called the Hotspots, and there's still copies of it floating around. I'm sure there's some in Lou's office from years gone by.
What do you remember, Ant?
No, Hotspots didn't exist when I was here.
Hotspots finished in 1985 when organisation development came through and the role was made redundant.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the reinvented, perhaps slightly more appropriate version?
Correct, slightly more appropriate version of Hotspots as our podcast for 7 years.
Which now has 2 extra voices. You heard there from Ant Reeve, who's a specialist in refractory, and Lou Clark, Principal Advisor, Communities and Communication, and also one of the brains behind this podcast.
Everything was done, it was edited, printed and everything on site, and some of the apprentices' jobs way back then were even to deliver them and everything. But they ended up in everyone's home in Georgetown. It was amazing.
I wonder if there'll be people listening now going, oh, I've got some of them somewhere out in the back room.
There would be, absolutely.
Quite often they're posted on the Georgetown Facebook page or the Historical Society's
Georgetown Pictorial
page. They also post Hotspots every now and again. Yeah.
There will be some people going, please don't read them. Please don't read them. While you're digging out your old copies of Hotspots, it's time for us to get into the interview proper, which took place upstairs in the boardroom. Now we're all going to have to get quite close. Yeah, okay. And once we were all seated and set up, I threw back to Lee Darcy for another bit of history, but this time about his career at the smelter.
I started 40 years ago in 1985 as an apprentice electrician on this site. So seen a lot of things in that time, and as well I did leave for a period, left for 6 months, then come back and actually studied engineering for 8 years while I was here, and then been in many roles since.
Wow. Why did you want to start here as an apprentice? How did that decision happen?
Quite easy for me. I did some work experience and year 10. And the only place I went to was actually Hydro Tasmania, to a power station, and I just fell in love with electricity, and I actually only applied for 2 jobs, and one was with Hydro Tasmania and one was with this smelter. And my father had previously worked at this smelter as well, so I knew a bit about this business from growing up, so it's just where I wanted to come, and all my neighbours worked here, and I thought, what a great place to come and work. So
It's a very Tasmanian story. Had you ever been on site as the son of an employee?
Yes, my father brought me on site a few times, whether he was allowed to or not. But back then, you could bring your children on site and different things. My father had a role where he worked off-site and, ironically, had a boat where he looked after some islands that this place used to look at. So he used to take us on the boat to a middle island and things. I thought, wow, what sort of place is this place? Didn't know it made aluminium. I just knew my father worked here and what a good place it would be, because all their friends and that worked here, and thought it would be a good place to come and work. And actually my parents had suggested there was only 2 options. It was either to come to this place or go further my studies, and this is the place I came to.
And it turns out Lee is not the only one who started on a boat and ended up at the smelter. Let's go now and get the history from Ant Reeve.
First started here on the 21st of December 1995, so 10 years after Lee, basically. So I'm just coming up to 30 years at the end of the year. Started in reconstruction originally, so that's when they were restarting 2 and 3 line back in the middle 90s. So I was building cells down there. That was my first job, and I've had quite a few different roles and different projects on site ever since.
You used a lot of words in that answer that I don't understand, but we'll get to that. Why did you want to come and work here?
Originally, so I was in the Navy prior to this. I was in communications. So when I got out of the Navy, I was talking to a friend's father who worked out here, Ken Smith, who used to work out here a long time ago. And Ken sort of said, I know they're putting people on out at the site, you should put a job in. And we sort of talked about it for a bit. And I thought, that sounds like a pretty good place to work. You know, the pay was pretty good working conditions. But I remember Ken did go on to say, you might think you're doing a bad job today, but there's always a worse one to do somewhere else on site. So, because there used to be some pretty horrible jobs on site.
You've got to love a bit of advice from a friend, particularly when it leads to a career at Bell Bay Aluminium, which is something Ant and Lou Clark have in common.
There's a little bit of a story as to how I ended up here, because my very good friend Kim Miller used to work here, who reads the news on Channel 7. And I had been working as the Executive Officer of the Launceston Chamber of Commerce and had stepped down from that because my dad had wanted me to have a crack at running for the Legislative Council. So I ran for the seat of
Rosevis.
Yes, Rosevis. Yeah, I came way down the list, Dan.
Your dad would have known.
Yeah. Anyway, so I didn't get in. And we had a little shindig on the night of the election, and Kim was there, and she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, I'm resigning from my job, you'd be really good at it. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And then she rang me a few days later and she said, no, I am resigning. You should apply for the role. So, yeah, that's how I came to be here. But I am the baby compared to Lee and Ant at 14 years.
14 years and you're still the baby. I mean, there's something about this site that keeps people here for a long time, which maybe we'll get to. But what did you know about working on site before you arrived?
I actually didn't know a lot. I certainly didn't know how aluminium was made, because it is quite a technical and complicated process. I knew kind of a little bit about it. I grew up on the West Tamar at Rowella. My dad was an orchardist and a farmer, so I knew a little bit about it, but not much at all. And really the first time I came on site was to have an interview with Ray Mostogle, who was the GM at the time, who you have interviewed, Penny, in one of our podcasts. So I love it. I love working here. I love the people who work here. I love the people outside of our site. I think I'm very lucky to be in the role that I'm in.
For people who've been listening to this podcast for a while, you will have heard other people mention Lou's name when they're talking about this place. And we are creating this podcast because it's 7 years that this site has been running. Lee, when you think about your role, what do you see your job as being? And this may not be exactly what the title is.
My job, first and foremost, is energy for the site. So we use a lot of electricity. We use gas. My role is to ensure that we have contracts in place and we have that for our future viability. From a strategy perspective, it's more about where are we in the next 5, 10, 20 years as well, and looking after that side of it. But as well, other work I do is we've got nearly 2,500 hectares of land. We've always got people wanting to buy land and look at investments and stuff. So that forms part of my role as well. But the exciting part that's open for me is the Bell Bay Advanced Manufacturing Zone. So I chair that board, and that's been a really good, insight into government and what we're trying to do in the area and how this business can support other businesses. And then for me, fortunately, I also sit on the Tasmanian Minerals Manufacturing Energy Council as a director on that. So that gets to see how all the businesses in Tasmania come together. So you get a lot of outside work and inside work, and I think really, work closely with Lou on all our external government relations stuff as well, and that's probably stuff that a lot of people on site never see. So, my role takes me off site sometimes more than it does on site. But the really good thing about that is I'm actually a brand ambassador, I call myself. I wear this badge with a fair bit of pride, and people realise that outside that I am representing the company I work for. So that's what gives me the biggest pride when you're outside the place.
Being able to wear those other hats in the community, do you think the knowledge you've learned outside this place has changed the way you operate when you're in here and the decisions you make, the way you look at opportunity?
Oh, absolutely. I think probably one of the big things, if I think of the Bell Bay Advanced Manufacturing Zone, we've got 45 business members. They're from all this local region. So our interest is all about Bell Bay and the Tamar Valley region. So you learn, you talk about things, you actually share that knowledge and impart that knowledge on others as well. But how we actually do our work, ironically, sometimes it's the other way. Rio Tinto is a big employer globally, so we've got things to share, but equally we've got things to learn, and sometimes we learn from the smallest member that we've got to bring in, and sometimes that's just about how they do things. I mean, because the smaller businesses are very innovative and we need to learn from them and listen to them as well, and we do that.
What's it like feeding back those ideas to the big beast that is Rio?
Penny, can I just say in relation to that, the Bell Bay Advanced Manufacturing Zone Limited is a really good example of that, because we were one of the enablers and drivers of this organisation being established. But we've shared that, Lee and I have, with the broader Rio Tinto group. So that's a perfect example of something that we've done here down in Little Tassie that has been shared with our colleagues across the world, and people have been really impressed with how that's been established and how it's running and the opportunities that it's created, and certainly there are people within Rio who look at it as a case study for how to do that kind of thing really well.
Do you think it may influence?
I think what it influences is people's thinking about how you can do things. You don't have to necessarily do it the way we did it, but if you consider what our thinking was and what our strategy was at the time, then you're probably onto a good thing.
When you first started in your role, Lou, maybe compared to now, how is it different?
I think it's much broader and bigger than what it was when I first started. Community expectations are always changing and evolving, and we have to change and evolve with that. We can't do things now the way we did them 14 years ago.
Can you give us an example what you mean about community expectations?
I guess there are a couple of examples, people's expectations in terms of our environmental footprint, climate change, those kinds of things. When I think about when I started 14 years ago, and Lee and Ant would be the same. I mean, when you guys started, I'm assuming no one talked about climate change or environment really. So, there's lots of expectations from community about how you manage your environmental footprint and what initiatives you're going to put out there in the community to mitigate impacts if that's what's happening. And I think it's incumbent on businesses like ours. We're a leader in the business community that we need to be listening to our community about that and about many, many other things as well.
And I understand that the listening does run deep. I think there's a few people that have you on speed dial whenever they've got something that they want to happen or they're looking for support. Lee as well? Okay. And I guess what I'm wondering is, in the way that you approach your role, how do you go about assessing whether it's a good fit and then making these things happen? Because there are many things that have happened that otherwise wouldn't have or may have been much slower if they needed to wait on other funding opportunities.
I think there's a couple of things there. I think we need to listen a lot. We shouldn't be the ones driving the conversation all the time, and it shouldn't be a top-down approach. You know, it should be a collaboration with community. And a really good example of that, I think, is the Georgetown Mountain Bike Trails, something which I'm really proud of, that we've been a partner with the Georgetown Council in. The trails were funded primarily by the Commonwealth, but more than half the trails are on our land, you know. So Lee talked about the fact that we own quite a lot of land, so we've utilised that to help establish mountain bike trails in the municipality, which I think is a fantastic thing and a really good example of a really big industry like ours being able to partner with community, support tourism and hospitality businesses in the region, you know, and I'd really like to do a lot more. Yeah, so that's a really good example, I think, of listening to our community. The Georgetown Chamber of Commerce did a lot of work advocating for mountain bike trails and approached us, and we put some money toward a feasibility study with the Georgetown Council, and it evolved from there. So, yeah, I'm super proud of that, yeah.
What do you remember about those early conversations, Lou? Because I'd imagine you must walk into some of these meetings and sometimes it's a community garden, sometimes it's new lights down at the footy ground, sometimes it's something else, and then, a mountain bike trail, please.
Well, I'm not a mountain biker, but we were having some conversations, and again, this is linked back to Bell Bay Advanced Manufacturing Zone around what our legacy would be. And at the time, I wasn't really sure what our legacy was going to be. So having these conversations about something like the mountain bike trails, which is really a long-term initiative, sustainable, can provide employment, can support hospitality and tourism, attract people to the region. Our employees, we've got lots of mountain bikers amongst our employees, so they were super proud of the fact that we were actually supporting this initiative. So obviously I go into lots of conversations with community about initiatives, projects, what we can do, what we can't do. I think the important thing is to listen and to have lots of conversations. And sometimes decisions like that take a bit of time, but I think they're the kind of decisions you don't want to rush.
And are you a mountain biker?
Am I what, sorry? What did you say? No, I'm not a mountain biker. I have got a low centre of gravity, but it doesn't seem to still don't seem to ride the mountain bikes. No.
When you think about your role in making innovation happen, making change happen, what are the projects that stand out for you?
I guess the first one that stands out for me was back in the 90s. There was a guy used to work here called Andrew Frelick who came up with this way of making it easier to turn the cells around down at Recon, and I was sort of integral in developing the systems and procedures to actually do that. But it all came back to that one idea, and then got supported by the likes of Leo Ruffo, and I can't remember who the operations manager was down at Pot Rooms then. It was someone probably like Kyle Gimple.
There will be people yelling at this podcast right now telling you the name. Yeah.
Yeah, and we came up with that, and the Recon team and the Pot Rooms team on the whole site are still getting benefit of that change today. So that was pretty proud of that one.
How does it happen? How does it happen that is it an operator works out a new way to do something and then presents it up the chain, where someone like you then needs to go and build systems and processes?
Yeah, it can come from any level in the organisation. Some of the best ideas come from the guys on the floor, or the team members on the floor. Yeah, that's one of the great things about the place is, you know, if it's a good idea and it has merit and it gets supported, it'll most likely happen. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes a long time to make it to happen, but that's that's just the way things. So I think you've got to do your risk assessments. You've got to make sure you've got all the robust systems in place before you make changes. So, yeah.
So let's go back to that time when you remember watching this new idea. Well, did you watch it? I don't know. Take me there. What happens when you see something like this?
So there's sessions around generating different ideas to save or improve or the process. And, yeah, I think Andrew Frelick had probably been sitting on this one for a while, but he said it, and he was a leader on site. He wasn't at operator level. And the people in the room, you could just see they all sort of stopped and paused and thought about what he'd actually said, and then because initially it sounded like it wouldn't have worked, but then when you actually thought about it, you started to see all the benefits of it. There was a bit of complexity around how to actually make the change, but once we solved that, it's been great for the site ever since. So, yeah.
That must feel good.
Yeah, no, it's pretty exciting to be part of a process like that, and to certainly get it to being in the room at the time when the idea was first generated right through to the implementation. That's something to certainly feel pretty proud about.
This idea of an ideas generation gathering, is that what it was called? Session?
Generation session, IGS, yes.
An IGS, of course, has got an acronym.
We have lots of acronyms in our business.
Tell me about an IGS. How long have they been happening for?
Well, over 25 years. Yeah, so it was our original way. Annually, we'd have these sessions where we'd gather, call it a pipeline of ideas, and then you'd look at those ideas and see which ones would go forward and things. But I think and you think about innovation, what we do now is every minute of every day is an ideas generation session. So our business has really transformed to everybody's empowered to bring ideas up, and it's actually really promoted. And because, as everybody knows, the ideas can come from anywhere. So, so no longer do we have a regimented, this is our ideas generation session. They're happening all the time. They happen all the time now, and it's encouraged. It's the way we work now. It's business as usual.
And how much change has come out of these small suggestions that may seem small at the time, but end up being, maybe quite revolutionary?
Well, they're coming up all the time. That's and the problem we have with it, sometimes it's hard to measure because we don't quantify it. It's just people just do things. And ironic, we have employees that do things at home and they bring that into work and they make a change at work, and people think, wow, didn't even know they were doing that. And people just take that for granted, And we as leaders on this site, we're always looking for that and always looking to try and pat people on the back, and sometimes you just don't know. So it's quite a vibrant, from ideas, because the leaders on site, they encourage that. But what we've then got to do is deliver on helping them, implementing and supporting them, and then locking them in. And I think the real value is, like we talked before, is then sharing them with the broader Rio group and sharing with other people as well.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but is there one of those ideas that you remember that you were able to help someone bring into action? So
one that's a very relevant one. We have we have a mascot of our business called Commander Kamalko, and you press a button and he tells you about the smelter. And the technology's old and outdated. So one of our electrical apprentices, Ethan, he took on the task to bring him back to life, would be the best way to describe it. And to his credit, he did a lot of work at home. He did a lot of work that nobody knew that he was doing to research it. And it's only in the last week that he's actually come to life. And people will see him at the 70th birthday party this year for the smelter, the 70th celebration. But that's a clear example of just somebody just with the will and desire, and an apprentice doing. It's just an outstanding reflection on somebody doing what they want to do and actually succeed.
He actually used AI as well, which is fantastic. So the Commander Kamalko, the apprentices years and years ago built him. And he was at our 2015 Open Days 10 years ago, and then, I don't know, someone decided to put him in a container. So we had to go find him and bring him out of the container. So Ethan has actually used AI to help him bring Commander Kamalko back to life. So now, before he'd only say one or two sentences, so now you can ask him a question he can answer about 400 questions about Bell Bay and aluminium and smelting and the process and all of that kind of stuff. So, as Lee mentioned, Ethan, he's done a power of work, but also done some work in his own time. And I think the wonderful thing about this little project is that when I asked Ethan if he would help out, he embraced this with open arms. You know, sometimes you ask people to do things and you can see that they begrudgingly say yes, but not Ethan. He was really, he really wanted to get his teeth into it. So,
and now he's created something that may make your jobs obsolete. Amazing.
He's going to be the new communities advisor, principal advisor.
That's right. One of the things I guess we're talking about is there's more than one role when it comes to innovating. One is to be able to innovate, but the other is to be able to encourage it. And Lou, if I was going to ask Lee about something where he's been a key innovator, what should I ask him?
Oh, it'd be something to do with your contracts for the power. There's different things that you're putting into the contract this time around to give us a better deal by us providing more services to the network.
I like that. That's my type of language, so I'm just now going to put it over to you, Lee. So you've changed the way that, I guess, the deal is done to be able to shore up power supply.
What we do now is we've spent all these years focusing on keeping the electricity onto the site to make aluminium, and that's been the way we look. Whereas now we're looking as our electricity we can actually turn on and off at times. And that's actually to benefit the state grid, the state of Tasmania. It's to do with, if there's a water shortage or a generator issue or something, we can react to that now. And our first innovation was when the Basslink connector came in nearly 20 years ago, is where we trip our whole smelter load if that link goes down, and that's actually to ensure the lights stay on for all the rest of Tasmanians. So what we're doing in our new contract is further expanding that to say that we can actually vary our demand on the plant from an electricity perspective, which, years gone by you would never do that because every bit of electricity was to make a bit of aluminium, whereas now it's actually looking the other way. So we actually view ourselves more as a battery, and we can actually help the state of Tasmania as well in their security and grid by varying our load as needed to. So that's been a change on site. It's created some innovation in our pot rooms team. They've had to learn to work differently and accommodate these needs over the past few years, and then start of next year they will start a whole new way of operating as well. So that is innovation.
It sounds like massive innovation. I mean, we know the history why this place is set up here in Tasmania is, well, one, because of the port, but also because of the hydroelectricity. Is this the first time that there's been such a huge change in the way that the site uses that power?
Yes, well, the Basslink one was the first time ever, and that was, people would ask, why would you turn it off when it's meant to be on all the time? Whereas now this is quite a big change. I mean, aluminium smelters are starting to do this globally because it's the way that they need to operate it. But Tasmania, being such a small state, it needs flexibility from its customers, and that's the flexibility that we're offering. So, and as well, our pot rooms people, as I mentioned them again, they're employing different ways of operating. They're having to think differently. They're doing some different design changes. So for them, it might create challenges for them, but they're up to challenges, but they're being quite innovative. So yeah, it's a big change from the way we've ever operated this place.
How big has it been for you in terms of the work that you've needed to do and the conversations you've needed to have locally, internally, and then with the broader Rio Tinto network to get this happening?
A real struggle to start with, because people would say, why would you put our asset at risk? But I think the great thing is having people on this site that are willing to embrace the change and take on the challenge. So that's what I've really enjoyed. Certainly our pot rooms people. I mean, if I call out Wilhelm Sadie, he's the brains of our process, and he was up for the challenge. And fortunately, he used to work for another smelter in South Africa that's been doing this before, so he's brought that innovation across to us, and has been really willing and open. And he then has had to. He's probably been more the advocate and to actually convince his own fellow peers to say this is the right thing to do, whereas I look at from a commercial side of it and then from a network security perspective, because when we explain to people that our smelter can help you keep the lights on at home, they actually can see us providing a service that is required.
How much of the willingness to do this relies on the people who work here to want to work in partnership with Tasmania as a whole and not just the site and the aluminium it produces?
Well, the willingness is 100%. That's our work. I mean, we have a gate we walk through every day, but our work, like certainly with Lou and myself, our work is majority externally, and then we just got to get the people on board. And I think a lot of it's about storytelling. You've got to tell the people on the site the why we want to do this, and it's and it's for the good of everybody, and it's not just for the good of ourselves. So I think that's the way that I'd frame it.
I'm going to come over to you now, Ant, because I hear you've got a title as Rio expert. Oh, yeah.
I forgot about that.
Did you? Yeah. I hear this is quite a celebrated title globally. Can you tell me what the title is?
So the Rio Expert is a program that Rio Tinto adopted a number of years ago, and it's for people in the technical side of the business who aren't in the leadership side, the people leadership side, to give them a progression or a pathway to actually grow and get promotions, etc., etc. Because there was nothing. A lot of people would stick. They didn't. People who are in the technology space want to love what they're doing and want to stay in that space, but there was nowhere for them to really grow in that space. So that's what the Rio Expert program was about. So I was in a technician for many, many, many years, and then I put in for the Rio Expert program, and now I'm sort of the equivalent of a superintendent. So it's enabled me to grow in that space, doing the work that I love. So.
Lou and Lee, when we talk about Ant as a problem solver, what else should I be asking him about?
I think you should ask him about the new generation bake.
The new generation bake? I don't know what we're baking. That could be in any context. Tell us about it, Ed.
I've heard about it. Whereabouts is it?
Come on.
Oh, righto. So the new generation bake, the head honcho from Canada came over to Tassie probably in about 2012, 2014. And I was giving a presentation on one of the constraints that the smelter has, which was around our carbon bacon furnace. We can't make enough anodes if pot rooms want to make more metal, blah, 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 blah. So partway through the conversation, he goes, you should have a look at these new generation flue walls they're doing over in Canada. And I go, I haven't heard anything about those. And he said, yeah, they basically don't put the head walls in. And I thought, geez, that's a wild idea. And then...
Wait, what are head walls and why are they important?
So the head walls is a supporting structure of the refractory work in the carbon bacon furnace.
It's where we bake.
Thank you, Lou.
It's where we bake the anodes, Penny, which are these big, I'm talking very basic, carbon blocks. So they go into the carbon baking furnace, which is this massive furnace, and spend a considerable amount of time in there. It's like baking a cake. That's what these guys tell me. So, yeah.
And you're taking something away, which you said was pretty wild.
Yeah, so at that point in time, I didn't really give it too much more thought. So that's a pretty wild idea. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. And then I was driving home from work that night, and I started thinking about it a bit more and what it could actually mean and how many these things we could fit in, and just did a bit more maths, just literally on the back of a beer coaster or an envelope.
I love a problem-solving brain. Listen to this.
And then I realised, I thought, holy hell, this if that works, it can make a step change for Bell Bay. And I remember calling up Leo Ruffo, who was my manager at the time, and said, Leo, we've got to look at this a bit harder, because if this works, it's just a game changer for the site. So anyway, a number of years later, the support of people like Alan Graham and people out of France and Megan Noonans and lots of different people, Roy Cahills and lots of different people, we've now got 75% of the bake converted to the NG, so new generation flue walls. So that's the benefits for the site is 30% gas saving. So anything where you're saving 30%, everyone's going to be happy. And personally, I take a lot of pride that, it's 30% less greenhouse gases. The process that I don't necessarily manage it, but it's certainly heavily involved with it is, it's having a benefit for the whole world. And we're actually the first smelter in the entire world to be running at an industrial level these type of walls. Canada's still got a couple of trial ones, but we've actually 75% fully implemented the whole thing. So, yeah.
And that is why you are a Rio expert. Tell me, what should I be asking Lou about, the innovation that she's made in the way she works with community? What do we think? Oh, thanks, I'll cut that bit out.
I think you should ask Lou about the change she's done in the strategic partnerships she has in place with different organisations now.
Okay, Lou, over to you.
Well, I guess, and this kind of goes back to when I first started. We used to say yes to everything, and we just can't do that. Unfortunately, we don't have a bottomless bucket of money in the community space as much as I would like that. Over time, we still support lots of small community-based organisations. We have a wonderful community grants program that runs annually. So we try to feed people into that program. And our employees assess the community grants. I don't do it. So we changed the process and now we get buy-in from our employees, which I think is great. It shouldn't be my decision. It should be their decision. There's criteria they have to follow. There's judging and weighted scores and all of that kind of stuff. So the governance in that program is very strong. But yes, I guess, over the years we've got to thinking about, well, what are the things strategically that we want to support and where are the community's needs? And there are a number of ways we find out what those needs are through our own, for example, social and economic impact reports. In 2023, we were a pilot for a Rio Tinto program called Local Voices, where we've actually gone out into the local Georgetown, West Tamar, Launceston communities, and a third party, Viconic, have interviewed people face to face, and there's online surveys people can complete. So we did a big anchor survey in 2023 to understand what our community was thinking about us, and that was something that we had not gone anywhere near in my first 13 years at working at the smelter. So it was fantastic that we could pilot that.
And is that a change from it's better to not know to actually we really need to know?
Well, we do really need to know, because if we don't know, then we're spending our money in the wrong place, or we're supporting the wrong initiatives, and we're not supporting things that community want and need. So my leader, Katie Miller, I think she, and I don't think I've quite got this right, but she says to her team, whenever we are transparent, I've never known anyone to get into trouble, for being transparent and being open and honest. So I think that's hugely important, and I think that's a really big change from where we were 14 years ago when I first started. So, yeah.
I can hear that the work that you've done, putting those level of governance and strategic lens over how the community is supported and how you can play the role in that partnership. But from what I've heard, the relationships too are really important for people to feel like they can talk to anyone, no matter where they sit in the hierarchy here at Bell Bay, whether that's at the supermarket or the petrol station or at the coffee van just up there. How have you gone about doing that in your way?
Well, the relationships are extremely important. And I think one of the benefits that Lee and I have is that we've worked here for a long time. There's no churn factor. So there's continuity in the people that you're dealing with, and building trust and relationships takes time. So I think the fact that we're here, me after 14 years, Lee after 40 years, and even Ant, who has relationships with contractors and suppliers outside of our site. I think that's super helpful. But I feel like you also have to embed yourself in the community a bit. I can't sit behind my desk or sit in an office 5 days a week and do my job properly. So I think it's really important that you're part of, we're as much a part of the community as the community itself in some respects. And when you talk to people, I mean, people kind of have almost grown up with the smelter. So it really is quite, a significant part of Georgetown's history. Yeah.
Lee, you were saying before that you grew up with the smelter. Your neighbours worked here. This is the 70th anniversary. What innovation are you hoping for in the next, 70 years? Let's say 10 years. What are you hoping happens, or what do you see the future being at a site that is old and needs constant upgrading and change to make sure that it can continue to do the job that it does?
Well, we do have a plan moving forward. So, our intention is to renew our energy contract for another 10 years. We've started already invest capital on the site to do that. So some of the great stuff is like currently how we extract metal out of our furnaces. We do it's quite a bit. It's manually intensive. It's hot. It's not a very pleasant job to do. So, recently we've had a trial vehicle here to look at how that's done by simply just driving a vehicle, taking that metal and transporting it. And it's a game changer for our smelter. So what I'm looking forward to is those sort of implementations. We've got a new ingot caster that's on its way here, which will change the way this plant can handle its metal and get different customers and things like that. So we've got cranes that, 25, 30 years old that need to have some upgrade work on it. So, we've always got that good work moving forward. So, my view is we actually spend the next 10 years setting ourselves up for the next 10, 20 after that. So, it's an exciting next 10 years because effectively we've got a lot of capital to spend in the first few years. And that's great for us, great for our community and great for all our suppliers and that as well, because we concentrate on local content as well. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And out of all of it, it has environmental improvements, it has safety improvements, and it'll continue to be a safer place to work.
What's next on your list, Ant?
Well, personally, it's taking my new boat out for a spin, but so I'd actually like to make the whole of carbon plant redundant by having the inert anode technology, but I don't think I'm going to see it, right? Because that's been coming for quite a while, that one. Well, personally, what I'd like to do is train or share my knowledge and experience with others around how to actually implement projects. So that's something that I've been pretty good at in the past, is sort of turning that harebrained idea that different people have, whether it's yourself or some other one else, actually turning that into something that you can actually implement in a sound and robust way. So it's trying to share that skill and experience and expertise with others. So we've got a bigger footprint of people on site who are capable of implementing different projects. So
the future looks bright here, though. We've just done 70 years.
Yeah, I think we're going pretty well as a smelter. Yeah, I don't know how else to answer that question.
I think that's fair. Yeah. And Lou, over to you. When you look at the role that you play and those connections between community and the commerce, I guess, that happens here on site, what are you hoping for?
Oh, that actually is quite a difficult question to answer. But I guess, I'm hoping that we can continue to support our community, not just through employment and purchasing from services and goods from local suppliers in Tasmania, but also through supporting, some fantastic initiatives, particularly in the Georgetown municipality, but also across the river from us in West Tamar. One of those initiatives I think the Mayor may have touched on with you, which is around the Three Trails project. So it's a tourism initiative which is, educating and celebrating Georgetown's Aboriginal history, heritage, and also enterprise. And the council recently approved stage 1 of that, and we contributed $100,000 towards that, and council have matched that to get stage 1 up and running. So stage 2 and stage 3 still to come, but I think hopefully we can continue to support really, really important initiatives like that outside of our gate, which will be a game changer for Georgetown, I think.
There seems to be a real culture of knowledge sharing here. And I mean, just as I sit in this room, the corporate and community knowledge that we have just sitting here is enormous about this site and its impact on the community. For anyone listening to this, so that might be past employees, present employees, potential employees, or just people in Tasmania who, like me, have heard about this place for years. What do you want people to know about life inside here and the 70 years that it's been here for?
First and foremost, we're a great employer. We look after our people, and there's many benefits of actually working for this business, and a lot of them extend in more, just not for the employer himself, but into family and friends and everything as well.
Is there a particular moment that you remember thinking, gosh, I'm lucky to work there?
Oh, for me, that's every day I get out of bed. I mean,
He's a brand ambassador.
So, yeah, I mean, as I clearly tell people, I come here because I want to be here, you know, and that's what I get out of bed for. So for me, it's about pride in the place.
How about for you, Lou? What do you want people listening to this to be thinking about?
Well, for me, if you come to work here, there's lots of opportunity within this operation, but there's also lots of opportunity with Rio Tinto. And perhaps an example of that is my nephew started working here, Jack. He was going to do a plumbing apprenticeship, but that all fell through. And I said to him and his dad, I said, oh, why don't you come and, you know, get a job down at the smelter? You know, there's lots of opportunity. We'll train you. You don't have to have any skills or qualification if you come into an operator role, because you'll learn all of that on the job. So he started in Potlines and is going gangbusters. So I think he got his forklift licence the other week and he's onto the crane next. So I think it's about opportunity.
He's going to love a shout out from his Auntie Lou here. G'day, Jack. Hope you're listening to this and hope the job's going well. But you only recommend to family if you actually want them there. So it's a testament. How about for you, Ant? What do you want people to know, to be thinking about as they listen to this?
Yeah, I guess it is the opportunity part as well, is because, yeah, I started here, I came in with my Navy days. None of the qualifications I had from Navy were relevant in the civilian world, so I was basically started my career from scratch, and came in as a process operator, and here it took me 30 years, but I'm a superintendent nowadays, so, you know, and there's multiple different stories of people that have come in as operators, even contractors working on site that were managers, and they're still working at the business, not necessarily at Bell Bay anymore, but on other sites, so, and there's lots of those stories, so, you know, there's lots of opportunities.
It's also about learning. I don't think I've ever learned so much in a job that I have been in since I've been here for 14 years. And I'm still learning. You know, I go to meetings where people talk about stuff and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have no idea can you explain that to me? And I've found myself in situations where, you know, I haven't necessarily known what to do, but there's always people to help here and always people to ask advice of, and everyone's so willing and giving. So I think that's part of it too.
Concur?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It feels like a good time to end. Thank you so much for sharing your stories today.
Thanks, Penny.
Pleasure. Thanks, Penny.
Well, after 5 episodes, 17 interviewees, many kilometres and countless stories, I too concur. The learning and insight about the people that have and continue to keep this smelter going have provided such a breadth of perspective and experience that many of us would not have otherwise had. Thank you to Bell Bay Aluminium for the opportunity to gather and share these stories. And happy birthday! While the new episodes will be on hold for a bit, there's almost 5 hours of stories already recorded here for you to share. So please do. Tell a friend, an old colleague, a community member, and let's see if we can give these stories the audience they deserve. My name is Penny Terry. Thank you for listening to Hotspots, a podcast that celebrates 70 years of the aluminium smelter at Bell Bay.